The first wax packs featuring 1986 Fleer baseball cards were born into a hobby fully engulfed in the fire of rookie card fever. Spurred on by the recent exploits of youngsters like Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, Don Mattingly, and Ron Kittle, and further fueled by our continued infatuation with Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron, and other oldsters, collectors couldn't get enough of that rookie card buzz. And 1986 Fleer obliged too, featuring not only the reigning Rookies of the Year, but a bum rush of multiplayer rookie cards that fed our speculators' hunger. Some of those guys panned out and some didn't, and the hobby as a whole took a big hit within a decade as we realized just how much product was out there. But that doesn't mean all is lost. In fact, the most valuable 1986 Fleer baseball cards are still favorites among collectors all these years later. And which cards are those? Stay tuned to find out. Keeping in mind, the rankings and values are based on recent eBay sales for PSA 9 specimens. You know the story. Nolan Ryan appears in a baseball card set, and that Nolan Ryan card is one of the most valuable cards in said set. It happens just about every dang time the Ryan Express shows up, and it happens here in the 1986 Fleer set. This hands-on-the-hip Astro Shot sells for about $25 in PSA 9. In 1986, Rose had just come off a magical run that saw him return to Riverfront Stadium as the Reds player-manager, led the team back into contention, and surpassed Ty Cobb as the all-time hit king. In the process, Charlie Hustle elevated his rookie card to hobby royalty, and that RC pulled the rest of Rose's cardboard up the value ladder with it. Rose may never make the Hall of Fame, but he maintains a stronghold on the affection of collectors, and his late career action shot brings in close to $25 in PSA 9 today. When this card debuted, it was all about Snyder, who had been part of Team USA in the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. He was the wonder boy who was going to make Cleveland fans forget about Joe Charbonneau and lead the Indians to a championship. Except home runs with very little on-base support and defense to make Dr. Strangelove cringe got Snyder nowhere fast, though he did smack 33 dingers in 1987. Meanwhile, Fielder had trouble sticking with the Blue Jays, became a superstar in Japan, then returned home to the Detroit Tigers. That's where in 1990 Fielder became the first player since George Foster in 1977 to reach 50 home runs in a season, 51 for Fielder, and turned himself into a fan favorite. Today, the Big Daddy Fleer rookie card is about a $20 item in PSA 9 condition. Early in 1985, even remote reaches of the baseball universe started to receive reports of the imminent arrival of the next diamond savior. Jose Canseco was going to rewrite the home run record books. 5 taters and a .302 batting average in the late season cup of coffee only bolstered that conviction, and the hobby was fairly frothing to get its hands on Canseco's 1986 RCs. That next spring, Topps whiffed completely, and Donruss ruled the hobby with their solo-rated rookies card for Jose. In between, you had this Fleer Major League Prospect card, which was only slightly diminished by the presence of Jose's Oakland A's teammate Eric Plunk. On a side note, how intimidating it must have been to stand in the box against a 6'5" strikeout pitcher named Plunk. Of course, things got a little silly for Jose after he became the major's first 40-40 man and won the 1988 American League MVP award, and he ultimately fell short of Cooperstown. Still, this card is part of hobby history, and today sells for around $20 in PSA 9 condition. Rickey Henderson, on the other hand, came out of the gates on fire and blazed his way all the way to the Hall of Fame. In between, he became the game's greatest ever leadoff hitter and obliterated pretty much every stolen base record. As a consequence, his card remains a strong hobby favorite, and this Yankees in blue pasteboard approaches $20 in graded mint condition today. Like Rickey, Ripken was pretty much pedal to the metal throughout his career with the Baltimore Orioles. And even beyond his 3,000 hits and 400-plus home runs, Rip had that signature moment, a moment that lasted for well over a decade. Of course, by the time Cal broke Lou Gehrig's consecutive games played streak in 1995, he was already a legend destined for a plaque in Cooperstown. All of Ripken's cards maintain strong collectors' interest today, and with his 1986 Fleer checking in around $15 in PSA 9. What do 8 National League batting titles, 3,141 hits, and a career 338 batting average buy a guy? Well, Cooperstown immortality for one, and underlying hobby love for another. Add in Gwyn's premature death at the age of 54 in 2014, and you have a beloved player who continues to tug at collectors' heartstrings and purse strings all these years later. Mr. Padres' 1986 Fleer card sells for about $15 in PSA 9 today. Like Gwynn, Sandberg debuted in all three major sets in 1983 without a lot of fanfare. And like Gwynn, Sandberg broke out in 1984, which in Rhino's case meant taking home the National League MVP award as the Chicago Cubs nabbed the flag in the old National League East Division. Sandberg had some ups and downs along the way, including a failed retirement in his mid-1990s, but he also ended up as one of the greatest second basemen ever and a spot in Cooperstown. As a result, Rhino's cardboard is still strong, and this 1986 Fleer sells for about $15 in slabbed mint condition today. The rookie class of 1985 wasn't all that exciting. I mean, the National League was sort of exciting, what with Cardinals burner Vince Coleman leading the way thanks to a rookie record of 110 stolen bases. That was good enough to nab the Rookie of the Year award, and of course Coleman would become more exciting in the years to come. Things were decidedly more blah in the American League, where good-field, light-hit White Sox shortstop Ozzie Guillen outpaced Brewers hurdler Teddy Hierra for rookie hardware. You can argue that Teddy should have actually won Rookie of the Year, and you wouldn't get much resistance from me, but Ozzie undoubtedly developed into a bigger personality, especially as he moved into the managerial ranks. And for years, Ozzie and Vince carried the top set, which missed out on some other big rookie cards listed here. Today, the Guillen Fleer rookie is about a $15 buy in PSA 9 condition. Greatest pitcher of the 1970s? You'd have a hard time arguing against Seaver, who's also in just about every rational person's top 10 of all time. It still looks strange to see the franchise in a Chi Sox uniform, but it's growing on me a bit after all these years. And it's grown on other collectors enough to push it close to $15 in PSA 9. Once upon a time, the Cincinnati Reds were loaded with young talent who might someday lead them to a championship. Eric Davis, Kirk Stillwell, Barry Larkin, Tom Browning, Jeff Treadwell, and yes, Cal Daniels and Paul O'Neill. And while not all of those guys contributed to the 1990 World Series team, and while the late 1980s didn't pan out like the Red fans had hoped, those were still some heady times. In the end, Daniels put up a few good seasons before heading to the Dodgers, and O'Neill, of course, became a hero for the Yankees. It's all enough to keep the Daniels-O'Neill Fleer rookie card in a low-glow limelight all these years later, and to make it a $10 card in slabbed mint condition.